I'm Brandi Kruse, and this is Politics Unpacked. Politics Unpacked is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42, making Washington a place for all to prosper. Sign up for their newsletter at future42.org. Welcome to Politics Unpacked on the final week of the regular legislative session. Now, I'm going to start with a caveat that a lot can change between now and when the regular session ends on Sunday. So we'll go through how things are at this point in time, again, with the understanding that especially on the budget front, things could change. So let's start with taxes. Democrats spent the week passing a slew of new and increased taxes. Among them is a multi-billion-dollar increase in the business and occupation tax. Republicans argued that this is going to push businesses out of the state.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very concerned not only about those two companies leaving the state and divesting their presence here, but what about the next generation? What about that young lady who's in a dorm room at Stanford University right now starting the next company? Is she going to say, I'm going to drive up to Washington State and start my business there? What about that first generation American living the American dream, deciding where they're going to locate their company? Are they going to choose Washington State? Or are they going to see a ceiling on the opportunity that this state offers for some of the most cutting-edge ideas in the entire world? They will choose other places to grow and expand. And the new companies that are coming up that have been looking at Washington State or in the past would have considered Washington State are going to say, no, thank you. I'm going to go to Idaho. I'm going to go to Texas. I'm going to go somewhere where they want my business, where they want my jobs. Mr. Speaker, this is a big step in the wrong direction.
For their part, Democrats acknowledge that businesses are contributing quite a bit, but in a budget crunch need to pony up a bit more.
Businesses do well when everybody in Washington is doing well. And I don't take lightly the sacrifice that everybody makes, whether it's your household or my household or businesses in our state or any of the taxpayers in our state. But, Mr. Speaker, I do believe at the end of the day that everybody in Washington is better off when we can well-resource our public schools, our public safety systems, our social safety net for the most vulnerable, and that's, at the end of the day, or maybe the beginning of the day, what this bill is about to me.
One of the big tax topics throughout the legislative session has been what's going to happen with property taxes. There had been a proposal that would have lifted the property tax levy lid from 1% to 3%. That proposal was shelved, but in its place, Democrats in the legislature have given local school districts more taxing authority when it comes to school levies. Senator John Braun, the Senate Republican leader, explained it to us in this way.
The simple terms is it's going to allow the levies to increase by $500 per child, which is about a 20% increase. And then it's going to allow those levies to grow for the next 5 years by inflation plus 3%. So in basically 5 or 6 years, you're going to have around a 60% increase in what's authorized for local levies. Now, that doesn't mean they become local levies. Doesn't mean it's a tax right away. The voters still have to pass that. Okay. But what historically happened is one of two things. One, they in the more urban areas, because the high assessed value, the rate increase to raise another $1,000 per child, rate increase is pennies. It's a dime or a quarter per $1,000 of assessed value. In more rural areas, like where I represent, it can be $2.50 per thousand. It can be as high as $5.50 per thousand if you can pass it. And that's the thing that I think is going to bring the real inequity is because of the overall pressure on property tax, and that's why we had such a public outcry about the rate increase. It's getting harder and harder to pass levies. We have three. In my, just we're up for a vote yesterday in my district. All three look to be failing at the moment. We'll see what happens. I understand the levy in Tacoma is failing right now. This is a combination of voter just weariness in property taxes and frankly, to a certain extent, and this gets into a whole other topic, failure of trust in our K-12 public education system.
Senator Braun then went on to have a pretty heated exchange with the superintendent of public instruction, Chris Rakedahl.
Seems highly likely that with increased levy authority, we're going to have more levy failures, which goes back exactly to your point, which means you have nothing. And you're saying this is better than nothing, but I'm looking at my district and saying we're likely to have nothing in more cases than not. How do we deal with that?
Thank you, Senator. Number one, separate levies and bonds. It's bonds that really struggle. It takes a 60% simple
levies, not
majority.
bonds.
Well, I want to be clear. The things that don't pass consistently are bonds at 60%. And I encourage you to go to a simple majority for
bonds.
that.
These were levies.
And on levies, we passed 90% of them, and they represent 93 or 94% of the dollars. They represent 93 to 94% of the dollars. So the second thing to answer your question, Senator, is you could get in your local newspaper, the Chronicle, and say, please pass levies in my community. I would appreciate your support for your community schools.
I have done that, but frankly, Superintendent, there's a lack of trust. And you're saying nothing here that's restoring that trust. No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there are a lot of new taxes that have been passed this week, but one of the weirdest ones is a tax on Tesla. So essentially what it does is it taxes Tesla on the value of credits that it has stocked up with the state of Washington for its production of electric vehicles.
You know, I think it is really great that we have so many innovative businesses in this state and in this country that are working on our transition to cleaner energy, cleaner transportation, cleaner air, a safe climate. There are even businesses that make extraordinary profits on that transition. The point of this bill is to say that in some cases, those extraordinary profits might go to a greater public purpose by investing in making those vehicles more available to Washingtonians than going 100% to profits of those manufacturers. The bill does not eliminate all the profits. It just says that a share of those profits would be better served investing in incentives and in infrastructure for Washington EV drivers than to exclusively pad the bottom lines of companies that are doing very well in today's economy.
Now, some Republicans have argued that the tax seems to be politically motivated given Elon Musk's support of President Donald Trump. And now a couple bills that are crossing the finish line at the last moment. Governor Bob Ferguson signed a controversial expansion to the state's reparations program. House Bill 1696 expands the state's reparations program to allow loans that were given as down payments to Black first-time homebuyers to be forgiven in their entirety.
Washington State's Covenant Homeownership Program provides down payment and closing cost assistance for lower-income first-time homebuyers. Lawmakers created the program to address the disproportionate impacts of racial redlining in Washington State. House Bill 1696 modifies the program by adjusting the area median income threshold for program eligibility, introducing loan forgiveness, and modifying the Oversight Committee membership. This modification will create more opportunities to close the racial homeownership gap, which is a very important goal for all of us here in Washington State. We so appreciate everybody who made this legislation possible. We know it's been, like any legislation, challenging. Yes. This one has its share of challenges, as we know. Yes. But Representative Taylor has been a real champion of this legislation, and so we appreciate your leadership in particular. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm pleased to sign this legislation.
Also on its way to the governor's desk for his likely signature is the controversial permit to purchase a firearm bill. Bill Kirk from Washington Gun Law joined us previously on the show to talk about what permit to purchase will mean for gun buyers.
Understand, in addition to that 10-day waiting period, now you're going to have to sign up for a class. You're going to have to go through live fire training. I don't know how a person goes through live fire training when, in fact, they don't have a firearm to actually use in live fire training. And so if you accomplish all of those goals and you can afford all of it, now we probably have added at least 3 to 5 weeks to the process. Then you go to get the firearm, you add another 10 days on top of that. So you're talking about people who might take up to 2 months, if everything goes really, really well, to be able to actually arm themselves.
I mean, I don't see how that's constitutional. Is this one where you're pretty confident it'll be struck down? It's just going to be another kind of matter of time thing?
Well, that's a tough question. If we're going to rely on the state Supreme Court and things like that, no, it will not be struck down at all. Is there a possibility that we're going to begin to see a lot more of this type of litigation on a federal level? Yes, I do believe this is one of the next battlefronts in the Second Amendment battle, if you would. And so I think perhaps the Supreme Court could weigh in on that, but that's going to be a ways down the road.
That has been Politics Unpacked on this final week of the regular legislative session. Keep following us across all of our undivided platforms for updates on what happens between now and Sunday. Politics Unpacked is brought to you by Future 42, making Washington a place for all to prosper. Sign up for their newsletter at future42.org. And in the meantime, join us 4 days a week for our live show, Undivided, where we give context and have important conversations about what's happening in Washington state and beyond. UndividedPod.com. That's UndividedPod.com.